But this is good news. According to Ryan Burge, our buddy Ryan Burge, he's looking at data that would suggest that support for Christian nationalism has actually decreased over the last 14, 15 years, not increased. He says it's a pretty basic question in the discussion about Christian nationalism. Are the sentiments toward Christian nationalism increasing or decreasing in the general public? So he dug into the Baylor Religion Survey from 2007 and the Baylor Religion Survey from 2021, where they asked the same questions. And these are the 6 questions that are used to get at Christian nationalism. Number 1, do you agree with this statement? The federal government should advocate Christian values. Number 2, the federal government should allow prayer in public schools. Number 3, the federal government should allow the display of religious symbols in public spaces. That one confuses me because it doesn't say Christian symbols, it says religious symbols. So if I'm saying I would love to see Hindu symbols in religion in public spaces, that means I'm a Christian nationalist? I don't think so. Number 4, the federal government should declare the United States a Christian nation. Number 5, and this one is an inverse. Do you disagree with the federal government should enforce strict separation of church and state? And number 6, do you agree with the success of the United States as part of God's plan? Those are the 6 questions that the Baylor study asked in 2007 and 2021, and discovered that all but one of them have almost universally gone down, decreased in support. The only one that has gone up is... Hey, you're interrupting me. I'm not even done with my spiel yet.
Sorry. Okay. Mm-hmm. I just want to state for the record that I think these questions suck.
Yeah.
And let my objection be heard, and then we can move on.
Okay. Yeah, I have serious problems with these questions, actually. The federal government should advocate Christian values. Are we disagreeing because we think the federal government shouldn't advocate any values, or just should only advocate unchristian values? That doesn't even make any sense.
If you say the government should advocate for like human dignity, that's a Christian value, but it's not only
or hard
a Christian
work
value.
And honesty. What are we even talking about? What are they thinking when they hear Christian values? And why did support of that decline since 2007? Because we're more sensitive about. Yeah. Okay. Should allow prayer in schools. That's not controversial. We know why that was eliminated. Should allow display of religious symbols. Any religion?
Wait.
I don't think so. A Baphomet in my. And the 6th one, the success of the United States is part of God's plan. That is the only one that support for that has gone up since 2007. Sky,
it doesn't say what
that's
part
a
of
good
God's plan.
for getting it?
Yeah, I mean, if you believe in the sovereignty of God, then you can say the success or failure of any country is part of God's cosmic plan for history, right?
Yeah.
So
and I've heard that defended that way by Christian nationalists. Of course, everyone agrees with that. That doesn't mean
I think the only 2 really good questions on this survey are should the federal government declare the United States a Christian nation, and should the federal government strictly enforce the separation of church and state? If you are pro declaring a Christian nation and you are against the separation of church and state, those might be indicators of Christian nationalism, but even those are not conclusive. So I don't think this is the best survey, but I digress.
Do you like any of the questions,
church and state? People don't know what the separation of church and state means. So I think that's an issue. And even the public school, prayer in public schools, allow prayer in public school. We do allow prayer in public schools. We don't allow like teacher-led prayer in public schools, but we allow. So I just think these kinds of, back to my point earlier, there are certain things that this kind of social science can tell us, and it's valuable and we should care about it and we should learn from it, but it is limited. And too many people act like if it's a statistic, that's a hard fact that I can rely upon. If it's theology, if it's ethics, that's like a squishy like thing that I can't really, when because it's so often not true.
Caitlin, theology doesn't have numbers.
Right. We love numbers.
How can it be an exact science without numbers? Except the book of Numbers, which
right. And that's the goal, of course. Exact science. Like, I just don't think we realize how weird we are in the whole history of human life to be obsessed with science and math or the only things that tell us objective, neutral facts about the world. That was never the goal for a lot of human history. And it wasn't even seen as the highest form of knowledge. Right. So it's valuable, but like sometimes we put so much weight on these statistics are the thing that tell us the most accurate story about the world when that's not always true.
Don't you think Don't you think part of the appeal is that being such a diverse, pluralistic society with so many divergent belief systems and values, it feels like numbers or so-called science becomes like this neutral arbiter that we can all agree on. 2 + 2 = 4, regardless of what your theology or ethics or whatever might be. So we keep wanting to come back. And I think there's actually some truth to that. That's part of the Enlightenment heritage of the United States, and part of the reason why we were able to be a pluralistic country is because the founders believed in reason and logic and science and some of these other ideas. It came back to bite them at times, but you're right, Caitlin, it has its limits. And we are now 250 years into this experiment of this republic, learning those limits and discovering, what do you do when you have a society as diverse as ours facing huge ethical questions about religion in the public square and abortion and life and personhood and on and on? It's really messy.
Right. We used to have armed conflict between Baptists and Congregationalists. That was hard for everybody to get along at one point. So now try to get Hindus and Muslims and Southern Baptists together in a room to decide when life starts. Holy cow. We got to wrap it up. So the good news is, I think, was there good news in this? That generally support for the questions that some people at Baylor believe indicate Christian nationalism is declining. So there isn't maybe, I do see, sorry guys, I see Christian nationalism as kind of a fringe movement, not necessarily the biggest pressing concern of humanity at this point. There are politicians who are openly claiming the name Christian nationalist, and, Lauren Boebert saying the church should be directing the government, not the government directing the church, whatever. But those are also fringe members of Congress in general. So I am, no, Sky already disagreed with me. I thought I was bringing us all together.
I think there's a lot we could unpack from Ryan's article here, but the one thing that I think needs to stand out is, this is a quote, "The number of Republicans who say the government should declare the U.S. a Christian nation is going up." So, or maybe it's not a quote, but it's in there. Like that's the one. When you break it down, the Republican Party or people aligned with the Republican Party are increasingly saying separation of church and state is not valuable. We should be declared a Christian nation. Christians should have a privileged role, all that. So I don't think this is necessarily the largest problem facing the country, but I think it is a significant problem when one of the two major political parties has given up on pluralism and constitutional boundaries on religion. I think that's a huge problem for the Republican Party, which then becomes a problem for the country.
Oh, Caitlin's skeptical about that.
No, I think one of the things you could draw from this data that is worth thinking about for us is that the decline that's being described and some of the increases that are being described can be at least partially attributed to just increasing polarization around these kinds of terms. So if you think America shouldn't be a Christian nation, I'm going to think it should be even harder. If you are the people saying we're the government should be Christian people, all of a sudden these other people who maybe historically thought Christian values were like a good thing to be involved in our public life are like, oh, no, now I have to be so much more separate. I mean, I thought the most interesting part of this was that some of the decline in answers to these statements was from mainline Protestants who are not the super conservative Republican, moral majority kind of folks, but who have a long history of saying Christian values should shape social work in the U.S. It should change policy. We should care about how God describes nations in the Bible, and that should affect how we advocate for policies, shrinking back from some of that maybe, because now that's a thing the other side owns, is being the Christian nationalist people. So I just think this should be a reminder for many of us that the pull towards polarization, the pull towards saying I'm with these kinds of people, and if I'm against you, everything you say must be wrong and everything of my side must be right. It's so hard to resist that. It's really important to resist it. It's really hard to resist it. And I see a lot of people, especially on social media, going, there just can be no goodness on the other side. Instead of saying, maybe there is a point you've made that's really good. It might be twisted in a way that I want to criticize. I might not like this other stuff that you believe, but can I see some goodness in the position you're taking and affirm it without feeling like I have lost ground in this existential battle that we are having between good and evil?
Yeah. Isn't this the Chick-fil-A phenomenon? like
everything
once
is a Chick-fil-A phenomenon.
I know. But like years ago when Chick-fil-A became kind of synonymous with conservative ethics on sexuality or whatever, then a bunch of people became anti-Chick-fil-A. But if you were to ask them, like, do you like fried chicken sandwich with a pickle? They'd be like, oh, I love it. It's the best. But I can't be pro Chick-fil-A because that would make me associated with things I disagree with. But they really do like Chick-fil-A. They just won't say it anymore. I think that's kind of what's going on.
Or even that it really does change. I mean,
still eat there.
But even on political issues, it could just be, it's not even just, oh, I'm not going to say out loud anymore what I think about this. It can just be, my mind has changed. Like my group determines what I think about this. And we are determined by what they think.
The single most counterintuitive piece of data from the study, and then we need to wrap it up, is that the one religious group, when Ryan Burge separated out religious groups, the one religious group that has not changed at all since 2007 is still somewhat in favor of the positive of many of these questions, are Black Protestants. Black Protestants did not decline at all in support for these questions as they're categorized as. Now, if you ask Black Protestants, are you in favor of Christian nationalism? I'm pretty sure most of them would say no because of what Christian nationalism is associated with. But when you ask Black Protestants, are you in favor of the government advocating for Christian values? Well, that's the whole civil rights movement, was trying to get the government of what was supposed to be a Christian nation act like they were Christians. So the political history of Black Protestantism is in the Black churches trying to get politicians to act more like Jesus because of how they viewed what that would mean for the world. Whereas the white Christian tradition very often was maintaining the status quo or trying to turn back the clock on in many cases, what Black Protestants were fighting for.
Right. Another reason why these 6 questions are the wrong ones to try to get at the identity of Christian nationalists in this. It just does. This is the wrong. We need that data. This isn't the survey to get it.